Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, episode 183.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a really good point. You're not going to see the chairman of the FCC in WLAN Pro workshops. So
it might be helpful. We'll see if we can pull that off. Nah, I don't think so.
Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
Hello, this is Keith Parsons again with Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, and with me today I have Mr. David Coleman. How are you today, Mr. Coleman?
Real good, Keith. Thanks for having me back.
Always glad to have the author of the CWNA Study Guide. You're like the man everyone knows of David Coleman.
Well, I don't know about that, and I do have a co-author, Mr. Westcott, but a few people know him as well. But
no, I don't. Not as much though. Because there's the where's Westcott? We know that he exists in the book, but in real life, does he really exist?
We're not really sure because he never comes to any conferences. But I'm sure if you wave a few $100 bills around at the Prague conference, he might show up.
Oh, yes, he is definitely coin operated. So
he's coin operated, but we love him. But to your point, very briefly, the Cybex CWNA Study Guide has made both of our careers, and we're very proud of it, and we're very proud of the fact that it has influenced a lot of people's careers.
And their muscle growth, too.
Yeah, it's a heavy book. It's a heavy book, and a lot of people have had a lot of fun at our expense to do the size of the book.
And you've taken it with, it's very humorous, and you've been fine with that. We didn't shoot you, GT and I, we shot your book. So it's
thank
much
you.
easier. Yeah. Well, anyway, you and I met together a couple weeks ago at the Wi-Fi Now conference in Reston, Virginia. And I thought since we were there, the two of us, and we got to talking, and there was a different feel and a different group of people there. So just to highlight, Wi-Fi Now conference put on by Klaus Hetting is one thing we're going to talk about. The second is the wifi-trek put on by the CBMP. And then the third one is the WLPC, the Wireless LAN Professionals Conference, put on by my company, Wireless LAN Pros. Anyway, between those three, you've attended all three of them. You've spoken at them. What can you tell me? What's the difference in feeling when you attend these?
Well, it's interesting because all three get a different kind of crowd. And I'll even throw in a fourth one at the tail end of this conversation, and that's the Wi-Fi Alliance conferences. But let's start with the three that you spoke of. So you and I were in Reston, Virginia for the Wi-Fi Now conference, and that typically happens in 3 or 4 times a year in different locations. There's usually one in Europe every year, and that's been quite successful. I believe they get 300 or 400 people for that. The most recent one here in the United States was in the D.C. area that you and I attended, and they had a pretty good crowd for that as well. And then they also recently had one in Beijing, and I've also attended one of theirs in Johannesburg, South Africa. But the crowd is very different than the WLAN Pros conference, which is a very techie crowd, or the CWNP conference, which is a mixture of newbies and techies. The Wi-Fi Now conference is more of a Wi-Fi business crowd, I would like to say. So there's a lot of analysts that are at the Wi-Fi Now conference, a lot of marketing individuals, business individuals, not just in Wi-Fi, but companies that have outlying business with Wi-Fi, like some telcos, for example, and as well as some wireless LAN vendors. But I think, Keith, you and I will agree, correct me if I'm wrong, but they had some pretty high-profile speakers at that conference.
Yeah, that's the one thing I noticed. They had, chairman of the FCC, commissioner of the FCC, but also chip manufacturers, Qualcomm, Theros. I was impressed with some of those. The speakers actually had some very, very decent and topical information, but it did feel since I didn't have a suit on, you had a suit, so you fit right in.
I had a jacket. I wasn't wearing a tie, but thank you. But there were a lot of ties there.
But it was looking good.
Well, thank you. There were a lot of ties there, and I don't think you see a lot of that at WLAN Pros. But I mean, a lot of the conferences and a lot of the speaking sessions were about the business of Wi-Fi and how it's growing in different verticals and how it might be used in the future. And so a lot of the presentations were that. I was kind of the rare exception when I spoke. I actually gave a little bit more of a technical presentation, but in general, it's more of a business presentations. I will say this, one of the ones that I did enjoy is the one that you mentioned, was kind of a roundtable of the 3 or 4 of the chipset vendors, Intel, Broadcom, and there was also Qualcomm and one other, I think maybe Marvell. And that was good. I learned a lot from that, and they had some high-profile individuals from all the companies, and they were asked some tough questions as well.
And they had Cisco's wireless BU chairman head of that too. So they did. Klaus, got to give it to Klaus. He's definitely has a ability of bringing in some high-profile speakers.
And they also had the chairman of the FCC was a speaker as well.
Maybe I need to learn from Klaus on getting really good speakers.
Are you saying that some of us that have spoken at your conference aren't quite that high profile?
Well, it's a different group. But the flip
yes,
side is. The chairman comes in and speaks and leaves and doesn't stay. The goal of the speakers we have at WLPC, I try to get they're not ringers. They're actually attendees are all speakers. So it's kind of a different mindset.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a really good point. You're not going to see the chairman of the FCC in WLAN Pro workshops. So
it might be helpful. We'll see if we can pull that off. Nah, I don't think so. From your standpoint, you've spoken at each of these. How was that different being on stage looking at that type of an audience? You get the same kind of feedback?
Honestly, I got really good feedback because the fact that I did a different presentation from everybody else. I did like a half business, half technical, where everybody else was just doing kind of business presentations. So I was a little bit nervous, quite frankly, because my presentation was a little bit different than everybody else's, but the feedback that I got from everybody was quite positive. It is a different crowd. Like I said, when you're standing in front of a room of suits and ties, but just like yourself, I've been doing speaking events now for years. So I enjoy speaking if it's 5 people or it's 500.
So let's transition now from Wi-Fi Now, which, by the way, if anyone wants to, I would recommend it. I attended I wanted to see kind of what their topics were. I've been to a couple of Wi-Fi Nows. I did learn things. It wasn't a lack of technical information there. It's just kind of more of a focus on the business side. And and Klaus, to his credit, is also a little anti-monetization. Though there are a lot of monetization sponsors that sponsor the conference, Klaus himself doesn't push that out too. He's not out there, rah go monetization.
Right, and once again, it was the same thing. I learned a lot from a business aspects and got to hear some other people's perspectives. It wasn't a very technical conference, but I learned a lot. Especially there was a lot of discussion on 5G versus Wi-Fi and throughout the conference, and that was very entertaining.
Entertaining. That's a good way of putting that. Yeah. That whole topic is we could speak for a couple of podcast sessions just on the whole Wi-Fi 6 versus 5G versus what are they going to call it? Wi-Fi 7 when we get 6 gig? That would be really confusing. Then we're comparing 5G against Wi-Fi 6 and 6G. Anyway.
Yeah, that's still under discussion, but I don't think 6 gigahertz will be Wi-Fi 7. I think that's to be determined.
That would just mess people's heads if that happened. So on to another conference that's targeted here. Now we're kind of skipping over all the vendor-centric conferences. Ruckus has Big Dogs, Aruba has Atmosphere, Cisco Live just happened. All of those also have very, very good content, usually focused on the vendor's topic. Has Arrowhead ever thought of doing a end user conference?
We actually do small ones. We don't really publicly advertise them quite as big as some of the other companies you just mentioned, but we've done several in Europe several years in a row. We call it Experience Days, and we recently did one for our partners in Asia as well. We haven't really done one in North America yet, but never say never. It's certainly a topic of conversation as Aerohive continues to grow as a company as well.
And those are also totally valid places to go. And one, from a CWNE standpoint, if you're CWNE, any of these conferences count toward your continuing ed requirements. So whether it's a vendor-centric one or a vendor-neutral conference, I think anytime you go to a conference, you hang out with people, you network, and you learn new information. So rah for all of those. Moving on, let's talk about CBMP's conference. Wi-fi-trek's coming up in this fall in September in Nashville. I just noticed that you're slated to be speaker. Yay! So, what do you think about CWMP Wi-fi-trek?
So I obviously try to speak every year at that due to my long-term relationship with the program and the fact that I write third-party study guides for some of their certifications. So I go back a long time with the program. But it is a different kind of conference than the one we just talked about, and quite different from the WLAN Pros conference as well, because it's kind of a mixture of guys that have been doing Wi-Fi for a long time, like yourself and me, and then people that are kind of new to Wi-Fi, that technical people that want to learn and want to get their foot in the door from the technical side of things. So I always enjoy that because it's kind of a mix of newbies and longtime pros. And sometimes when I get there, I forget that half the room doesn't know as much as, like, I assume everybody knows at a WLAN Pros conference.
Well, and they kind of cater to that market a little bit, which is good, in that if you attend the Wi-fi-trek, you get a free CBMP exam, and they have on-site exam with the Robert Bart Springs' testing center there, and everyone gets to take a test. So I applaud that effort. I think it's a fantastic thing that they can pull off, that they push the taking exams live while you're at a conference. It's great stuff.
Yeah, and anything we can do to get more people educated and, quite frankly, at the minimum CWNA certified. One of the biggest problems every wireless LAN vendor faces, including Aerohive, but also our competitors, is I cannot tell you, still to this day, how many times our support gets phone calls about, and they say the Wi-Fi is broken, and 9 out of 10 times it's not the Wi-Fi. Or if it is the Wi-Fi, it has to do with bad design, or people that deployed it know nothing about Wi-Fi. So what the CWMP program does and the Wi-fi-trek conference does is they kind of give that base level and foundation education and certification in the technology. And we need to push that. We need to be behind it. And so I hope they continue to grow and more and more people become aware of them and at least get a CWNA certification and get that kind of knowledge in their head.
Well, if you're interested, at the Wi-fi-trek conferences, they have boot camps the weekend before, the couple of days before, and they support all of the CBMP exams, CBNA, SP, DP, AP, and this time they're going to be launching a new CWSA, I think that's what it's called, the new integration certification. So that if you want to be on the front end of that boot camp will be taught by Tom Carpenter.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to learning more about some of their new certifications. To be honest with you, I've just kind of been hearing about it in the background, but the program's been around now for almost 20 years, and so they're still viable. They're growing. I think they're stronger in North America than they are in other parts of the country. Hopefully, they can expand it, but it is the CWNA and all the CWMP certifications are recognized worldwide. And I will say this too: if you go to any wireless LANs vendors training, they at a minimum usually recommend CWNA as a prerequisite. So the whole industry has kind of embraced them as well as a way for people to get that foundation level of 802.11 and Wi-Fi knowledge.
And like you, I applaud the effort. I think everyone needs to go through that same process and get there along the way. I've also been attending. I think I've attended all of the wifi-trek conferences, and they also have a wide range of speakers from not the business oriented side of Wi-Fi now, but more technical, but kind of a broad range. Some people who've been in a long time, but also some newbies also get a chance to get up and speak and share. At last year's, Tom Carpenter went through and did a kind of a history of the whole CBMP program, which was a nice, where were we, where are we now, and where are we going to go in the future. So I think CBMP program itself is strong, moving forward, and Sean Stallings, their CEO, spoke at WLPC as well, giving him a little, what's the state of CBMP, and says that the program's strong and growing, and like you, I think we should all support it. Let's move on to WLPC. You've been to only a few.
No, I've been to about 3 or 4, I think. There's a lot that I've missed, quite frankly, because I wanted other people at my company to be able to go. So I forfeited that seat so they could go. But yeah, I've been to, I think, 3 or 4, I think. A couple in Phoenix and maybe 1 or 2 over in Europe. But there's been quite a few I wanted to go to, Keith, that I just couldn't make it. But I'm hoping to be there in Prague. I think I'll be there in Prague this year. So
I've attended some great conferences in my life, and part of Tech Field Day, got to attend and meet on Wireless Field Day and Mobility Field Day and all the things that Gestalt and Stephen Foskett had put together. And I wanted that kind of experience, but for lots of people, because you can only have 12 people kind of representing the industry in the Tech Field Day. And so I wanted to make a conference that was the kind of conference I wanted to go to, very low or non-existent from a vendor standpoint, and just a place to go hang out with my friends. And luckily, it seemed to turn out where a lot of people had the same idea. Let's go and hang out with friends and talk tech for 3 days.
it really is like the ultimate geek Wi-Fi conference. It is highly technical, but it's also a lot of people that are friends and know each other as well. So you really have built a community, Keith, and kudos to you and for that, and keep it up. But it's just a lot of fun. I always tell people, I mean, no offense to the other conferences because they're great and I like them, but I always tell people if you really want to get for the deep dives and the technical stuff, go to a WLAN Pros because people's knowledge will rub off on you. I've been doing Wi-Fi for 20 plus years, and every time I go to one of these things, I'm like, I didn't know that, and I didn't know that, and it's just fun too. I'll give a perfect example. I've been teaching and configuring 802.1x and EAP for 20 years, and I thought I had really creative ways to explain the technology. And then this past year in Phoenix, Eddie gets up there and does this whole thing about troubleshooting 802.1x, and he used it like a Wireshark and like using wrap terms, and it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. And he had everybody rolling, but he also showed people that you can actually have fun while you're doing some highly technical troubleshooting.
And fun and packet capture don't normally go together, but he pulled that one off very well.
They don't.
I don't have the accent for it, but the accent went really well with his descriptions.
I think he's the only guy who could pull that off. But it was, it's not just about the technical. You have the workshops and the boot and what do you call them? Your boot camps and the
deep dives.
The deep dives. Thank you. And then once again, there's also the good news is that anybody that can attend, you have your videos that you make available of all the speaking sessions, like the next week. The advantage of attending is the camaraderie and the side conversations and all the communications you have while you're there. So I highly recommend it for anybody. If you have the chance, whether it's in Europe or whether it's in Phoenix, go. It's worth the money, and you'll fill your brain with knowledge.
That's the goal. And actually, I can't take credit for it. All we do from WLM Pro side is we ask the audience what they want, and then amazing, all you have to do is give it to them, and then they're happy. It's a really simple formula.
Well, there is one other conference.
Yeah. I haven't attended one of these, so it's new for me. What do you have you been to one of these?
So the Wi-Fi Alliance. The Wi-Fi Alliance has meeting three times a year. And you have to be a member, really, to attend these. So I work for a member company, Aerohive, and we pay our dues. And we also have a vote. If anybody didn't know, the Wi-Fi Alliance has two primary purposes. They're the marketing wing of the industry, and they also do create all the test beds for the interoperability testing. Most of the people that attend Wi-Fi Alliance conferences are, for the bulk, they're engineers. And so it's they're spending a lot of time discussing certification standards, and it can be very dry. So it's not for everybody. But I got to tell you, I am now my company's primary representative to the Wi-Fi Alliance, so that we can vote in different task groups. And I did enjoy it. It's a completely different kind of group. I don't think there's a lot of people from that group that also are going to show up at a WLAN Pros. They're just not the same circles. Like I said, it's mostly engineers. A lot of times, a lot of people from the chipset vendors. The only people that I know that might move in and out between a Wi-Fi Alliance meetings and, say, your conference would be myself and also maybe Chuck from Aruba. But other than that, it's a different kind of world. So I don't know if there's going to be many listeners to this podcast that were actually going to be attending a Wi-Fi Alliance, but I'll say this. If anybody wants to learn more about the Wi-Fi Alliance, anybody can become a member. I mean, it costs money, but anybody can become a member and actually influence things too. So I hear people saying things about the Wi-Fi Alliance all the time, but they don't understand why they do it. Well, you know what? If for example, a big channel partner out there like a Presidio or somebody like that, if they wanted to join the Wi-Fi Alliance, they could, and they could have a vote. So it's open to anybody. It's a consortium of Wi-Fi companies, and so I enjoy it. It's interesting. I'm still learning more about it, though.
I have a question for you. You had mentioned in the preface to Wi-Fi Alliance that two of the roles. One was the marketing arm of Wi-Fi, and the second is the certification. So sounds like the meeting is very certification driven with the engineers being there. Was there any like a separate track on the marketing side? Because I can't see engineers who work on the cert actually also working on the marketing. A
little bit. The conference is mostly more in the technical side. The Wi-Fi Alliance does have a member marketing group that allows members to participate in marketing events for the Wi-Fi Alliance. And my company, Aerohive, is actually very aggressive. I actually just recently wrote a guest blog for the Wi-Fi Alliance. And they also have a speakers bureau, too. So member companies can have speakers that go on loan to the Wi-Fi Alliance and can be representative to the Wi-Fi Alliance. But yes, there's always marketing initiatives. And I got to tell you, you got to hand it to them. I mean, Wi-Fi is a brand. It's a trademark brand, and anywhere you go in the world, people know what Wi-Fi is.
Yeah, I mean, in 20 years, it's the brand, the value of the brand itself is, everyone talks about Wi-Fi. They don't talk much about 802.11. So a very successful process that they've pulled off over these years. The whole Wi-Fi 6 thing.
Yeah, the whole Wi-Fi 6 thing, I know a lot of the techies were kind of against it at first, but quite frankly, I think it's brilliant. And the average Joe will understand what Wi-Fi 6 is. They'll understand, hey, that's the new and improved Wi-Fi. You say 802.11ax to them, they're going to look at you with a blank stare.
I just have a fear that we're going to get even worse situations for troubleshooting. Somebody's going to say, well, I just bought a Wi-Fi 6 phone, and how come I'm not getting my gigabit that I needed? And, though I don't know if the Wi-Fi 6 is going to make it worse. It's just going to give them an easier way to talk about it.
We've had that problem since day one, Keith. That's never going away.
Yeah. It's not a new problem. So it just has a new name. It's got a Wi-Fi 6 name with it.
Yeah, which I think will increase the brand.
Well, we've known each other for about 20 years now, and both been teaching CBNAs forever. Just go into your little Wayback Machine. Think back maybe 15 years ago. Had you thought at that time, I wonder if 15 years from now, I'll still be teaching code-channel inference, or I'll still be teaching the contention algorithm. I thought those were kind of going to go away. and we're still doing the same basics or haven't really changed in 20 years.
We're coming up with creative ways to build upon those things you just mentioned, as well as deal with problems such as CCI. And I will say this, Wi-Fi keeps getting better, but it also keeps getting more complex. But there's still that foundation stuff that you have to talk about. And CCI and the contention, which you just spoke of, are two things I speak of almost on a daily basis, it seems like. There's some things I wish I didn't have to bring up. Like if one more person asks me about hiding the SSID, I think I'm going to scream. but and I still get that question.
It's a security measure,
Yeah, I still get that question. It just drives me crazy. You would think after 20 years I wouldn't have to answer that question anymore, but no. But yeah, Wi-Fi, like I said, it's getting more complex, but it is getting better, and they're continuing to build on the foundation of the technology, and so you still have to understand things as simple as how medium contention work. It's not really simple, but you have to know how that works to understand where we're headed with the technology. Let me put it that way.
So what do you think about 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi? Obviously, it's going to be Wi-Fi 6 AX in 6 gigahertz alone, which is fantastic, with no backward compatibility. What do you think that's going to do for Wi-Fi 6 in, greenfield installs? You think that's going to be a possibility?
Absolutely. Nothing's written in stone yet. It's looking very hopeful that the FCC and other regulatory bodies are going to open that up. And when it does, I think you'll see chipset vendors as well as wireless LAN vendors jump into it very fast. My prediction is that, it'll probably be greenfield, AX, which means you don't have to deal with a lot of the backward compatibility issues and the RTS, CTS overhead. I think initially it's going to be a technology that'll be used for mesh backhaul. That's my belief. An immediate need that'll be able to fill, and then as the clients become available, then you'll start seeing a wide range of clients become available as well. It's exciting stuff. It's not here yet, but I'm pretty confident that it's on the way.
Well, you've been presenting on it for I don't even know how many times. So you've got definitely skills and know how to explain that to other people. So if you haven't, there's a lot of blogs and some videos of Mr. Coleman here talking about where Wi-Fi 6 802.11ax is coming in the future. Well, thanks for your time today. We've used up our time with Mr. Coleman. And David, thank you for your time. Appreciate what you've done with this.
Thanks very much, Keith. Always a pleasure. And I hope to see you and everybody else in Prague here in, about 3 or 4 months. So thanks again.
Yeah. It'll be great. And love talking about the other conferences. If you need other information, we'll put links in the show notes for our Wi-Fi Now conference. Wifi-trek is coming up in September. That's on the CWMP website. WLPC Prague is going to be in October, and then again back in Phoenix in February. So thanks for your information, and we'll catch you on the next podcast.
10 Talks.
Hi, everybody. First and foremost, Keith, I want to pass my most sincerest thanks to you for putting me the first 10 Talk after the Whiskey and Wi-Fi show last night. I really, really appreciate it this morning. And of course the conference, right? It's a fantastic show. My name is Sam. I'm here to do a presentation on the topic of It Depends. This is who I am. This is what I do. I know I'm not supposed to dwell on About Me slides, but it's the only place I get to advertise myself. So currently doing podcasting on the Center Freak show with JD, No Strings Attached show with Blake, and of course Whiskey and Wi-Fi, as some of you saw the train wreck last night with Ryan. So that's what I've got going on. Of course, obviously working on the Wi-Fi Pros Slack group as well. So if you're not in that and you would like to be in that, just send me a DM or an email or whatever. So it depends. Keith put out a call for papers prior to WLPC, and a friend of mine said, hey, you should submit a topic called It Depends. Yeah, sure, go ahead. And so I went ahead and submitted it, and like, this is never going to get any traction. And of course, lo and behold, here I am standing on stage talking about it. And so I'm like, damn, now I got to get some content created. What the heck am I going to do to talk about this topic of it depends? And so I did some digging, and I tried to go back in time to try and figure out where this whole it depends thing in the Wi-Fi industry started off. Those of you that don't know, obviously, there's a lot of ifs and thens, and there's a lot of conversations around how you can do anything in particular. And for some reason or another, a large number of individuals have pointed at me as being the it depends guy. And I think that a lot of it started with, when Twitter started it, there was a 140 character limitation. And it's really, really hard to have a comprehensive response to a question in 140 characters. Likewise in 280 characters. And there are a lot of us that have really, really strong opinions. And so you either get these short bursts of passion, or you get these, threaded tweets, or you get a whole lot of engagement that tends to be very, very bursty and can be very, very contentious. And really, I think when I first started doing it, it was less about trying to be, what's the word, pedantic, right? And more about trying to teach somebody to fish. Right? It's more about trying to educate people, I think, and giving them, sort of that choose your own adventure conversation about what it is you should be doing based on what it is the questions that you're asking are. And so when I looked back in time, I was sort of all over the map. I saw all sorts of references, and there was, this has been going on for quite some time. And at some point I gave up because I couldn't really find out, what the genesis was. But I'm certainly happy to own non-exclusive rights to the it depends phrase. So if you guys want to use it depends, please feel free. Who is this? This is Rick, right? Is Rick here? He is not. Oh, over there? Over there? Rick. Yes, there you go. So he asked, something about how do we get to be able to use this it depends phrase, and a lot of people have asked. And the reality is that obviously it depends. There's some folks who have added the little trademark symbol on it, or the registered symbol on it. And so I went and I looked because I was interested in finding out what it actually took to get a trademark on something, because that seems to sort of be the next common question, is because it depends with a little trademark. And of course it says that trademark signifies common trademark law rights. And so you can just put TM after anything, and if you're a commercial organization, as I understand it, you can claim trademark to something. Well, I'm not a commercial organization, so really this whole trademark thing, even the registration of a trademark, isn't really something that is possible. And of course, this gets pulled from the definitive resource of all things on the internet, Wikipedia. And so it comes back to this. When we talk about Wi-Fi design in my book, Wi-Fi design is more like art than it is science. And so there are two well-known pictures on the screen in front of you. And I like to look at it like this. If I say, who thinks the picture on the left is better than the picture on the right? Or who thinks the picture on the right is better than the picture on the left? Of course, the answer is, there is no correct answer. It all depends on the color and the context of what it is that you're talking about. And so when I look at Wi-Fi as an art form, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of different people to look at things a lot of different ways. And I think that creates sort of this melding of strong opinions about how you should do one thing this way or another. So we get fielded with questions all day long, right? What about this? What about that? Should I use RRM? Should I should I put APs in the hallway? Should I put APs? How should I do a design? What is considered good? What is considered bad? And I think that by and large, I think most people in this room would probably say, those are really, really great questions. But in order to answer them, you really need to have, a much more comprehensive understanding about who is doing what and what it is they're trying to do. True story. Bob, we'll use his name, came to me and he's like, hey, do I need to do an AP on a stick? I'm like, Well, that's a fantastic question. And so, I went into this, tirade of, it's all about risk versus reward and validation of your environment prior to hanging your AP in your ceiling. And, I have my, sort of 5-minute spiel on, should you do an AP on a stick? And it came back after I had said all of my things. And he's like, no. He's like, our requirements that we got from our vendor is this. Temporarily install wireless APs in locations specified on your architectural drawing, then using a laptop-equipped site survey software, determine the signal strength within each coverage area. And he said, what I meant to say was, is this an AP on a stick? Because this is what we have to do. He said, our device manufacturer said, in order to maintain compliance or in order to be supportable, these are the things that you need to do in your environment. And if you don't do them, then that's going to be the first thing we sort of wash our hands of. And so this is a really, really great example, I think, of color and context where you can take a seemingly innocent answer, innocent question, and it may have nothing to do with, should I do an AP on a stick? It may be all about supportability, or it may be all about any number of things. And this, by the way, is a blurb pulled letter for letter from Microsoft. In fact, Microsoft actually recommends this. So if you're a Microsoft shop, you should be aware that this is what Microsoft recommends you do. Follow it or not, I don't know. A pendant is a person who is excessively concerned with formalism, accuracy, precision, or one who makes ostentatious and arrogant show of learning. Again, I believe this comes from the all-knowing Wikipedia. Yeah, it sure does. And so that's really the definition of pendant as far as I'm concerned. And it's a good definition. And there are certainly a lot of ostentatious and arrogant people in the industry. And so perhaps this is a really, really good way to describe people. And those of you that are haters that say, you know what, I hear you, but it depends is a terrible response to anything because it doesn't help anybody. I hear you. I think everybody hears. Here are some choice opinions on the matter. I think that there are a lot of opinions from a lot of people, and it's easy to say you need to be answering with more than just depends, because it's easy to throw stones, right? It's easy to say, oh, you're just deflecting. Oh, you're just being a pendant. The reality is that when I talk to people and I engage with people about this topic on a more one-on-one basis, and we have a dialogue about what this really means, in response to some of those previous tweets, the comment was, it's like it depends as the answer, instead of realizing it's a simple way to say there's more work to do. And this comes from the very, very wise Ryan Ansbach. I think he was probably drinking at the time. So, for my part, consider the source. All right, consider who's asking the question. And obviously, the age-old mantra of pick two of the three. All right, easy, cheap, good. Which two are you asking for? And if you can provide some color and context in your ask around what your goals are and what it is you're trying to do, then that's going to help somebody help you better. And it's going to push that it depends deflection a little bit further on down the road. Try and be as comprehensive as you can. We know not everybody's an expert, right? There are certainly things that I don't know. There's a lot that I don't know. But if we don't know, us helping you get to the right person or the right source of truth for your topic is going to be a lot easier if you can be more comprehensive. And show some skin in the game. Has anybody ever had somebody reach out to them and go, oh, should I do fill in the blank? Can you do that for me? No, this isn't a, hey, reach out for some free help and then you're going to get a config from somebody. Work with who it is that you're asking your opinion of. And that came from me. I actually wrote those letters myself. So, thanks for listening to me on my soapbox. I'm down to 10 seconds. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and please stop by and say hi if you liked it. And you can get your own hello, my name is sticker. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates. And also connect directly with Keith on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.